Thanks.
Welcome to the Love Paywall discussion group. Tonight we talk about
on the church. I didn't share it on the
episode 5, huh?
I only shared it on the church thing.
Oh, that's fine. We talk about episode 5, a misplaced curse. Let's avoid the nakedness part until the end.
Just avoid it altogether.
Well, that's what it's all about.
Nah. I like the idea of the parallels continuing. So last week we talked a little bit about the parallels of the flood being like God hovering over the water in Genesis 1, and in Genesis 1 as well, he separates land from water, and in the flood story, he separates land from water. And then it goes on to Noah opening a window, and that's, God said, let there be light. And then, of course, he sends a bird out, but he sends a bird out, and it brings back vegetation. So vegetation...
The garden.
Yeah, well, it goes with the creation of vegetation in
Right.
Genesis 1, and then animals exiting the ark correlates with the creation of animals. Noah exits the ark, it's the creation of man. And then God tells Noah and his family to be fruitful and multiply. Sound familiar?
Mm-hmm.
And then he also says, everything that lives and moves about will be free for you, will be food for you, just as I gave you the green plants, and now I give you everything. So before, it's another correlation. Before he said, I give you everything that grows for food, and now you can eat everything.
Right.
Does that speak to anybody? Anybody have a comment?
Yeah. Also, it was the first mention of a vineyard, and I think they use the analogy. I don't really disagree with that because I happen to like vineyards, but I think they're good, but only when used properly. But I think he equated, if I'm not mistaken, he equated the vineyard to be like the fruit in
The garden. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, where something bad happened, and something definitely did happen here.
I do think it's interesting that and I didn't really think too much about it until you said it, where he talked about the animals giving you everything. It's almost like he goes, you have all this, but then this time around, it is like restarting, right? It's like a restart. But now you can eat everything. There is no limitation now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you already messed it up back then, so you might as well just go ahead and eat it all. I mean, I don't know if that's God's thinking, but that's what it seemed like.
He's like, I said before,
you might as
don't
well
eat
just
this.
go ahead and eat
Just
it all.
eat it.
Yeah, just
The
eat
rules
it
change.
because you're going to eat it anyway.
Yeah.
Because you can.
Yeah, that's what I didn't think.
I know
about
who
that
you are.
before. Yeah,
You're just going to do it anyway.
but it is also like he gave them more. I gave you all that, but now like he went one more and gave them more, which is crazy because you would think, listen, all you're going to have now is apples. I don't know, but he gave more. I don't know. I just think it's interesting.
So it says in verse 20, Noah, a man of the soil. And I just noticed that goes back to Adam.
Mm-hmm.
And it was saying there was no one to till the soil. And then he created Adam. So he proceeds to plant a vineyard, as Gordon said. He drank some of his wine, and then he lay drunk in his tent naked. And I like how he said, well, what's the big deal about being naked? You're in your tent. When, why is that so unnatural to be naked in your tent? And then it all goes downhill.
I think one of the things that stands out to me, they always talk about what are the problems in the text. And one of the problems is things aren't 24-hour chronological. Like they leave the ark, he plants a garden or plants a vineyard, drinks the wine. Well, that didn't happen all in one day.
That's a good point.
There are a lot of things that are going on that aren't mentioned. And planting a vineyard doesn't happen in a day. Making wine doesn't happen in a day.
Yeah.
It takes about 6 years.
And so there's time that's being going on, whatever the word is. And what helps me realize I don't have to know all the details about every little thing.
Right.
It's not important how long was it from the time he got out of the ark till the time he planted the garden, or the vineyard, till the time he made the wine, till the time he got drunk. We don't. All that timeline isn't spelled out for us.
Mhm.
And I think sometimes we try to oversimplify the stories, and we have the ark in the background and the vineyard in the right there.
Yeah.
Like it would all happen in the same day or the same week. And
God said, "Let there be vineyard."
yes, and it doesn't happen that way. So that kind of helps me kind of try to sit back and relook at it, and not make it the Sunday school Bible lesson that I grew up learning.
Sure.
That it's there's more to it than that. So, and in this story, there's a lot that happens that we're not told what happens. We're only told, I guess, what God wanted us to know.
Right.
Which is that's a problem in the story.
Yeah.
Fill in the blanks.
Yeah.
What was the word for vineyard again? Do you remember what that was?
I can tell you. Here.
Did they say it on the podcast?
I don't
Well,
think
it's
they did.
because this is the first time it's ever referenced.
First
Why?
mention?
First mention. So then it just makes me think of how many times Jesus is talking about the vineyard in his lessons. And so what they usually say is, the first time it's been mentioned, that's what you're supposed
It's
to
a precedent.
understand what
Yeah.
is being said there.
Here's what the sounds like. Yeah. Any minute now.
Strong's H3754. Canada.
Cadden. That's a vineyard. Cadden. You know.
Karen.
Karen.
Yeah, Cadden. Yeah. In the Bible, a lot of people have a hard time and avoid the Old Testament because sometimes it is hard to read. It can be confusing at times. Sometimes things don't fit the way we think they should fit. But I appreciate what Mark said, that God wrote it here for a reason. It's here for a reason. And I think it's interesting. I think it's called the law of fallibility, because there are many arguments about man wrote the Bible, and man's been rewriting the Bible over and over again, trying to get it right. Well, if that's true, you'd think I would want to leave some of this stuff out. I think they use the analogy of Peter. Peter wouldn't mess up as much and get in trouble as much or get a rebuke as much, and he might even be a faster runner. And if he was to write it, But so the fact that there are things in here that are going on that obviously aren't right, doesn't take away anything from the validity of the Bible or its truthfulness. And sometimes just because it's in here doesn't mean it's right. I know particularly the terrible treatment of women in the Old Testament. A lot of people have a hard time with that, and understandably so. But just because it's there and just because it happened doesn't mean that's God's heart and makes it right. Because when Jesus comes along, he starts equalizing everybody, and some of his most devout followers were women, and when you look at the way they followed him, sometimes they put the other disciples, even the apostles, to shame, I think. And just there's some hard things here, and it's hard to understand why is that there. What's the big deal about this? And it's great to dig deeper and look into those things to maybe try to understand why. But like what Mark said, we don't have to understand everything. We don't have to understand why.
Okay.
We can just trust the story.
Well, we trust the story, but then we're supposed to dig.
Yeah, let's dig. Let's trust and dig.
Yeah.
Now, isn't there another problem in the story with the birth order, the way that
Yeah.
the
Shem,
sons
Ham,
are?
and
Yes.
Japheth, yeah.
Are
Yeah,
they
they got
mentioned?
them order. And
Because
yes,
Ham was the youngest, right?
Chapter 10.
Mm,
Shem, Ham, Japheth.
Yeah, he learned what his youngest son had done. So Ham was the youngest.
right.
Because usually they're always named in oldest to youngest.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I don't know why. The birth order's different.
It has to be to trip you up,
Yeah.
to make you look at something.
And then this whole thing going on when Ham, whatever he did, to his father, all of a sudden he's not in the picture anymore. He's Ham, the father of Canaan. And now he's not even referred to as Ham anymore. Canaan is now, and and he's really upset, and he's calling down all these curses on Canaan, and blessings on his other two sons.
So that's the reason why Jews don't eat meat, because of ham.
Why we don't eat
No
pork.
pigs.
Right.
No pork.
No more ham.
Because they always called it ham
Yeah.
No more ham.
back in Hebrew.
So the nakedness was another parallel. God covered Adam and Eve,
Right.
and in this story, his sons covered him, the two that weren't involved in whatever happened to him. And I like how he says, he woke up and he's like, he knew something had happened to him, so it has to be something pretty drastic. Ray and I were talking about it a few weeks ago, and we both kind of theorized that it was circumcision rather than castration or molestation, just because circumcision makes sense for the Jews. But that wouldn't make sense for the whole rivers thing that they go back to in Genesis chapter 2, verse 10, when they're making that correlation between the rivers being like a family tree, because rivers split off
Mm-hmm.
and form other rivers.
Right.
And they have the three rivers that have detail, and the last river, which is the Euphrates, has none. And I guess they're correlating that between him having three sons and he's supposed to have another one, but another one never comes
Right.
because he's been castrated.
Yeah, I read I did some other reading on that. And the other uses of that, saw my father's nakedness, also refers to going in and having sex with your mother or stepmother. And so another rabbi teacher guy who felt like that what Ham did was, while his dad was drunk, he went and had sex with his stepmom. And she became pregnant and had Canaan.
And that's Canaan.
And so Noah didn't want to have anything else to do with her, so he didn't have any more sons. And that would explain how every time Canaan is mentioned, that it's not Noah's son. It's pointed out that it's the Canaan, the son of Ham. It's pointed out that they emphasized that. So this commentator was saying that he felt like that the drastic thing that happened was Ham got his stepmother pregnant.
Yeah, to me that makes more sense because you're on a boat, 40 days, 40 nights. You have plenty of time to lust after someone other than your own wife on the boat. And
Yeah, see, I have a problem with. There's Dad. He's naked. I'm gonna go castrate him. Wow, that doesn't make.
How hard was he sleeping?
That makes zero sense.
yeah.
That makes zero sense to me.
Yeah.
But Dad's incapacitated, and she's there and available. I'm gonna go get her.
Maybe she was drinking too.
Yeah.
Well, that's one of the things we talked
So
about
that's
too.
to me that makes a whole lot more sense. But even that, none of it is spelled out.
Yeah.
So whatever we come up to, or whatever we think is what makes more sense, or our conclusion, that wasn't revealed to us, so we don't really know. And I felt like in this particular podcast, that it seemed like let's go for the most outlandish thing and just throw it out there. Like we're so brilliant, we thought this up that it's, and I was like, really? That's the best you can come up with? Because that just seems there is no correlation as to why that would have been plausible, or why would you think that?
Right.
I didn't see the logic or how it fit in, but there are other instances where men molested their mother or their sister or whatever. There's a lot of that happening in the Bible.
Yeah.
And the offspring and what happens with those offspring and how that becomes a significant story, where maybe, to me, this makes more sense.
You know, that kind of, to me, in my mind, mirrors the sons of God coming down, lusting after the women, you know, having children with them. So it's like, it's happening both ways. Like, not only angels are doing that, but like, you know, sons are doing it to their mothers. Like, you know, and even if it was castration, I still attribute that to 40 days on a boat.
Yeah.
Well, I thought about the idea of, okay, so if it was castration, God's command to Noah was to be fruitful and multiply. That's what when they first came out of the boat, this is what I want you to do. And I thought, well, why would Ham do that?
Right.
And, you know, what would be his reasoning unless he was thinking that Noah was going to take all the wives, since he's going to be living a long time. And if there was some jealousy, if there was some envy, and realizing that what God had promised him, he was going to fulfill. So he was like, well, I'm going to take what I want, and this is how I'm going to do it.
Or if he's just pulling an Abraham.
Yeah.
And
She couldn't get pregnant.
yeah, so I was sitting there
Right then.
thinking, why would he do that though? Then run to his brothers and immediately tell them what he did,
Yeah, that part was kind of weird.
and then his brothers.
Scolded mom.
But then I think about, okay, if he is castrated,
Don't want that image.
you're gonna wake up. He would have to be really drunk for him not to feel that at all, and then wake up, and there would be blood everywhere. That would explain why they would walk backwards and cover him up, thinking that he may have been dead. And then he kind of sets up and goes, "Oh, yeah," because that's how I would kind of feel waking up from anesthesia. But there would be blood everywhere, and they could have thought their dad was dead. And I don't know if that was a tradition to cover up the dead at that point or not, but that's some of the thoughts that I had if it went that way. But like you said, you know, it doesn't really tell us one way or another. And I think it's not the point that actually took place. I think it's the underlying story that
Right.
God is trying to tell us through it all too.
I was kind of thinking something similar like that because I could see what you were saying, Mark, about how it's very likely and it makes sense that he molested his mother. But I could also see the castration thing, and I kind of related back to the Kane and Abel situation. You know, Kane feeling threatened and insecure and needing to do something drastic to try to, I don't know, get his way, to go after what he wanted. And kind of like what you were saying about envying what Noah might accomplish in the future. Maybe he felt threatened by any future siblings that would come along, you know, because when you the more people, the more things are divided up, and so the less that you will gain. And
That's a
so
good point.
I was wondering if maybe he's like, okay, if my dad's lineage is cut off from here now, I have no more competition than I already do. But I mean, same can go for the molestation, because he's not going to want to be with his wife, and he'll have an heir. So
My kind of thoughts was kind of a little along the same side, but regardless of what happened, my kind of thought was, because Noah was Shem's father, the creator and the creation, kind of think God and Lucifer, God the creator, Lucifer the creation. Maybe Shem, whatever he did, was the desire to be in charge. Now that the world started again, so maybe that was a reason why he did whatever it was he did, because he wanted the position or authority of some sort.
whatever he did was bad.
Right. And, you know, one of the things about the timeline not being spelled out very clearly for us, because when you get to chapter 10, it names Ham's sons, Cush, Egypt, Put, and Canaan. So that makes Canaan the youngest. In that, if they're listed
If they
chronological
follow.
order,
Yeah.
which they normally do.
Yeah.
So when they got off the boat, they didn't have any sons. But by the time Canaan was born, he was the fourth son of Ham.
So
Unless they're doing the same thing they did in this chapter, where
Yeah.
they reverse him because he's cursed and he's the one that.
Maybe so.
Well, and there could have been a possibility. I was just something I mentioned to him that I looked up. When you go back to Genesis 7:7, it says Noah, his sons, his wife, and his sons' wives entered the ark. Well, it didn't really say they all had wives.
Well, Peter says it does.
That
it says-
Ham had a wife.
Yeah.
Okay.
When Peter talks about the flood, he says, in which 8 souls were saved.
Okay.
4 men, 4 women.
Gotcha. That would make sense.
There you go. Wow, good point. But also, this is in chapter 9 here. It's mentioned Ham, the father of Canaan, but then Canaan and all of Ham's sons aren't mentioned, like you said, until Genesis chapter 10. So was he already born, or was he being a little prophetic there?
Right. That's why the chronology.
Yeah,
It doesn't. It doesn't.
It doesn't
Timeline
apply.
doesn't-
It didn't happen like they got off the boat, drank some wine. Next they woke up, and Ham had a son named Canaan.
Right.
It was,
At minimum, this is a 3-year
Well, you know how
process.
sailors are.
yeah.
But did he cursed
On boats.
Canaan,
They were there
so
for a
he
long
would have
time.
known the name of Canaan already.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or they had
'Cause
already
Canaan-
planned to name them.
Yeah, I know there's another
There
Midrash
could
that
have
said
been-
that Canaan was the one that did it, and then Ham is the one that was like, I guess, telling everybody, or
Tried to cover it up. or-
So
Trying to
that's
cover
why
it
he
up.
cursed, because it wouldn't. I don't think it would have been something where he would have gotten her pregnant, and he found out because he cursed him by name, which means Canaan was likely already around.
Or it was revealed when he was
That
born
he
or
was,
something.
yeah,
And the
that could have been
timeline
true.
was-
Yeah, maybe he was born and something about him made
They
him.
did a reveal party.
Or,
That went bad.
It's your son. You are the dad.
yeah, it was a Maury. It was
One
a Maury
number, two
situation.
notes.
That's why Canaan.
you are the father.
You are
That,
the
that could
was
be
a
the
lie.
that could be the plausible thing why he cursed Canaan, because Canaan was a result of what Shem did.
Right.
And that's why it's cursed, because we don't have a timeline
Right.
of how long things.
That's why I went with the idea of the molestation, because why would Cain or Canaan get the punishment when he was something that his dad did? I mean, why? But if he's the result of what his dad did, then
It'd be the result of the curse.
it makes a little more sense.
The whole
First
thing
Oedipus
throws me
situation?
off, though, when the two brothers walked in with the.
Yeah. Why-
That throws me off because it seems like it's happening now. It's not a, hey, that throws me off.
Right.
Because that makes me wonder, was it he just saw him naked and that was shameful? I mean, was it that? I don't think it was, because I mean, all the things
Now,
that
when you
are-
read all the other
are tied in
passages,
doesn't make
talk-
sense. It doesn't
it
make
talks
sense
about
that that would.
nakedness.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense that would be the case. But that's what throws me off is the timing of they walked in to cover their. I don't know. It doesn't make sense.
And it's probably not the first time they saw their dad taking a leak off the edge of the boat. I mean, so to see him naked, I mean, we've all seen our parents when we were little kids.
I think that, yeah.
And it's not a big deal. And so I think for that mention of it, to see your dad naked, you'd probably just turn around and walk out. But it's not a big deal. It's not like, hey, I'm going to go tell my sister or my brothers, hey, I saw dad naked. It would be like, ooh, that'd be kind of.
And then
So I don't know the timing.
Right.
But
the timing is all.
But for your heart to go then brag to your brothers about something, and then them have to urgently go and cover him up, something serious, like I said, happened. And I was wondering if they didn't think he was dead, like, you killed your dad, so let's go cover him up. That was my thinking of it.
Right.
And then
Yeah, I don't understand the walking in backwards.
Yeah,
that-
because even if you thought he was dead, you would. Why would
I mean,
you?
how do you-
Yeah,
how do you do
I don't
that?
know. But then
Yeah.
I wonder too: do we overthink? I mean,
Right.
that's our Western idea. We want
Yeah.
to see how did they do it?
yeah,
yeah,
Timber.
we're in the everything.
Investigating the crime scene here.
Just
Hey,
for
God
fun.
might be going.
Noah CSI.
But I think
Stop
part of it.
focusing on that.
I think part of the reason why we don't know exactly what happened is because the
That's
significance.
not gonna work anymore.
What happened and why is probably not the most important part of this story.
Right.
You know, And so, and we'll get into it a little bit, and I think as we read further in the story, we'll see that's the important part of the story.
Yeah.
So that's why I think we don't know, because that's not the important part. The
Yeah.
sin and the shame is not the important part.
And it's okay not to know.
Yeah, because the result is a curse, and he says that the word, I guess the word he used, is the same word for cursing that God used for Cain. So is Noah stepping in God's place in this role to curse his grandson because his grandson is reflecting Cain, or his son is reflecting Cain. So he's passing the curse along when he should be forgiving.
And he makes a comment about the same thing as God being one to know when to stop creating, when to stop destroying. Noah, it says he's invited to know when to stop the cursing or the unforgiveness.
Good point. And that was one of the parallels too from creation. God knew when to stop creating, and he also knew when to stop destroying. So there was a time for the rain to end, and God made the rain end.
And it brings up a big point about forgiveness. How it says it was the invitation for Noah to know when enough is enough. So it was an invitation to trust God. So to forgive is to trust God with whatever the situation you're forgiving.
And I think that's the main point. If we're going to take away something from this, because it's hard to, what we're going to take away here is that. But also, I just thought about it. This family, they were not a perfect family. There were issues. And I think that's, in fact, I know it's true for every family. And a lot of times, we grow up in our families and we think, wow, I went through some really bad stuff because my parents weren't perfect, and they're not. And then sometimes we carry that into our adulthood, and thinking that, well, we're all messed up. Well, we are all messed up because that's why Jesus came, to heal us and to mold us and shape us into to live the life that that He had planned for us. Because the life we did it our way, it was a mess. And so I think for those of us who experienced a rough childhood, which I think maybe all of us can raise our hand on that, because growing up is hard no matter what, even with the best of parents. But I think this is here because it's what happened. And that's just what happened.
Yeah.
And so there it is. It's in the Bible.
Also think about, so Cain killed his brother Abel. And so that, I was thinking about, what if the description for the Euphrates having a lack of a description also tied into him not having a lineage to go forth from. But if he's like reflecting Cain, then like his crime is that he stopped somebody from living a life or from reproducing or whatever.
Right.
But like Stephen and I were talking about earlier, when trusting God to forgive people and trust that God's going to take care of it, like that was a hard thing for me to accept early on, forgiveness of people, because I want that power, I want that control to dole out punishment, and then it's like, I heard a story about a lady who, her son got murdered, and they didn't find the guy who killed her son. And so I guess after she had gotten finished mourning him, the guy who killed her son was racked with guilt, came to her house and said, "I'm the one that killed your son." So instead of punishing him, he became her son. And like we talk about often about reconciliation rather than punishment.
Mhm.
And Noah, in this story, should have been focused on reconciliation rather than punishment.
Right.
How can we fix this problem rather than now you're a slave to
Right.
your brothers, you
Right.
know?
That
Yeah,
thing
that's
of
a good
stopping the madness
Yeah.
for me hit home. Because now that Noah's punished Canaan, what's Canaan going to do? Like, how is that going to affect,
Does he even have a
his
chance?
life, right?
Mhm.
How's he going to be treated? What's that going to do for him? And then, like, his children and so on. Like, you have this whole line of people that are going to come from that. And how is that going to shape them? When, if you had done, like what you're saying, reconciliation instead, then what would have changed in this story and what would have happened?
Right.
Yeah, they made the comment that Canaan's people would be at odds with God.
With God's people forever.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like what now is the distorted view of God from one generation to another.
Mm-hmm. Just from
Yeah.
one thing.
And you got to think about people who refuse God or turn away from God is because in some form of fashion they have a distorted view of God.
Mm-hmm.
Sure.
And so God is this almighty smiter when he's not. But that's
Yeah.
the distorted view that they have.
Mm-hmm.
So that we learn to forgive and trust God, become the people who give a corrector or more or better view of God.
Yeah, people all say that they don't like the Old Testament because God's so mean in the Old Testament.
Right.
But most of the meanness came from other people.
Yeah.
That's right.
It wasn't God being mean.
No.
It was the people being mean.
Yeah.
He's just trying to fix it.
And when you talked about the forgiveness thing, when I was in counseling, the guy was talking to me and he said that I needed to learn how to forgive. And I said, but they hurt me. You don't understand. They hurt me. And he says, well, here's the deal. You only have to forgive the people that hurt you. The other people don't need it. And, if they hadn't hurt you, you wouldn't have to forgive them.
Mm-hmm.
But they did hurt you. That's why you have to forgive them. And the only people you need to forgive are the people that hurt you because the others don't need it. And that just rocked me. I didn't.
Wow.
Because I kept holding on to the feeling, but they hurt me.
Yeah.
And we'd talk in this big long circle, and it'd come back to the same thing, but they hurt me. And he goes, well, those are the people you need to forgive. And when we read these stories and things, whatever happened to Noah, it hurt him.
Yeah.
And then he had to lash out. And I know that has gotten me in a lot of trouble because somebody hurt me, then I lash out. And what's the repercussions of that? And now this whole distorted view of God, generational, happens because of that. Where maybe we have to learn more. What would God do here rather than cursing generations? What would God do, and how could God help make this right rather than wallowing in our hurt?
Yeah, I don't know if they mentioned it. I listened to it again today, but where does the power of these curses come from?
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
the fact that Noah
because
cursed him and he was cursed, it's almost like God was like, okay, well,
Yeah, just because he said it, that
yeah,
doesn't
he
happen.
said it. I mean, God could have said, just relax, it's okay. But the power of the curse, the power of the blessing too. Both of them. It's
That's pretty interesting.
almost as though God, whatever Noah said,
He backed it up.
or was that a cultural thing where you're cursed now? Everybody's just
That's what I think.
Dad
what
said.
I-
Dad
that's
said
possible.
you're cursed,
Yeah.
so
So
sorry.
you're cursed.
You're cursed.
Everybody's going to see him that way.
And we're going to make
Everybody
sure.
sees you that way and treats you that way.
And we're going to
because
make sure
you're
you're cursed.
Yeah.
I just think it's an interesting thing though, because we just look at it and go, well, he's cursed now, but why? We don't. That's not
Yeah,
our
where's the
culture.
power
We don't-
of the curse come
right,
from?
where- So what's the power? Or even the blessing. If now you're blessed, with Jacob and Esau, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you have the blessing. Oh no, give me the blessing. But couldn't he have said, wait a minute, you tricked me. You don't get the blessing. You get the blessing. But it's like once it was said, it didn't matter. It was done. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
Right. That's
Well, God can do anything, but that was apparently His plan, and a lot of times we think of God as, okay, I got to pray a certain way, and if I do it on my knees, then God's going to answer the prayer. Or if I do it with fasting, God's going to answer the prayer. God's going to answer the prayer. He's going to do it. His answer is going to be yes, no, or not yet.
Mm-hmm.
And
Or no.
yeah, sometimes I think we can be, if we're not careful, we can think of God that way. Like, if I say the certain words, I force his hand, and he has to do it that way.
Like a magical incantation or something.
Right. And it's easy because, like, we believe in baptism because the Bible says so. People jump in water all the time and get wet, but they don't get baptized. And so it's easy for us to kind of think of God in those terms. But we can't force his hand. Yes, he can do whatever he wants, but he wants to do what's best for us, not always what we want.
One thing that'll come up over time is that God's always looking for people that want it.
Yes.
Like with
Good point.
Jacob and Esau. Esau didn't care about his birthright.
No.
Yeah.
He was like, I'll trade it for some soup right now. Just give me the soup or I'm going to starve to death. God wants people that wants it, like Abraham. Abraham, the Midrash teaching will talk about him destroying all his dad's statues of little gods.
Yeah.
Because he wants it. Like, he wants there to be something real in God, not these things that we make with our hands and sell to people. And the word is chutzpah. So eventually we'll come up with chutzpah.
Yeah. I think it's so true. God wants people who want it the most. Jesus used the parable of the talents.
Yeah.
There were 3 guys, and the owner gave them talents according to their abilities, and the one had 5, one had 3, and the other 1, and 2 of them doubled it, but they both got the same reward.
Mm-hmm.
And the one who didn't want it hid it in the ground. It got taken away from him and given to the one with the with the 5, now 10. So now he had 11. So I think same thing with faith and our diligence in digging into God's Word. What do we want here? Do we want to gain more knowledge, or do we want to know truth? Because God is truth. Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through him. And I think the more we want that truth. Now, sometimes truth may be different than what we were told, or what we were taught, or what we originally believed, which then forces us to make a decision. What I really want. Do I want to believe what I already believe and know? And I think sometimes we tend to limit our study of the Bible to those things that we think we know, and stick to those scriptures that kind of affirm what we already know, because it's easier that way. It's kind of like going to your favorite restaurant. You go to that restaurant because the food is good and you like it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think true seekers of truth need to embrace the difficult truths that conflict with some things, but dig deeper. Don't just take it on face value. But if it's important to God, He's going to say it in His Word, not just one place, but place after place after place, and it'll be completely obvious. And then hopefully have the conviction that maybe what I was taught was wrong because it conflicts with what this says. And does that mean that the person who told me that was wrong and was a bad person? No, they were sincere. They were just sincerely wrong.
I think with the Midrash, what this is kind of like they put, Ham on trial, and you had one attorney from one side and one attorney for the other side, and this is the only facts that you had. And so I think with the Midrash, that was kind of the conclusions out of the courtroom fight of what they, thought could have happened. One, he could have definitely had a relationship with his mother, stepmother, whatever she was, or they assaulted him. or that Ham assaulted him. Because I know he points out both, and he kind of went with one because it just seemed to him to make more sense. But if you were to put him on trial, and we were all to fight it out, what would we come up with? Look at the ideas that we had. But like I said, that underlining story, one, it kind of mirrors the creation story. You have nakedness, you have covering of nakedness, you have a garden, because that's what he planted, the vineyard. You have there was some other things about Noah that basically corresponded to Adam and Eve, in that story. There was something evil that happened, and they had to leave. Ham had to leave, or he left. So it's kind of like a retelling of that story again.
Yeah, I keep thinking about how families do the same things. Like Abraham lied, Jacob lied. It's like everywhere they go, it's like they do the same things, and it's like
It usually gets worse and worse.
I think I'd do the same things that my dad did. That
Yeah, there's a
weren't
thing.
all that great.
You can study generational sin, and you can see how families. Abraham lied, Isaac lied. And it's just we have family sins, for good, for bad. I mean, it's just we do.
Yeah, and that stuff amazes me because it's like a very, very spiritual thing. Because when Abraham lied about those things, Isaac wasn't born yet.
Yeah.
So, how did that?
How do you even know?
How do you know to lie?
Yeah, it's crazy. Because there's things I've seen my son. I go, man, I know he's that way, but he hasn't seen me be that way. But I'm that way generally. And I go, what? How did that?
Yeah, because I grew up without my dad being at home. So my parents are divorced, and my mom would always be like, "You're just like your dad." I didn't hang out with my dad long
Isn't that
enough
crazy?
to get these traits. So
Like in your
how
blood or
how am I
something.
just
In
like
your
my
DNA.
dad? Yeah, it is.
Might be.
It is.
That's interesting.
So next week, what is next week's lesson?
Nakedness again?
Maybe.
No.
Oh, a tale of a tower. Okay, cool.
Yep.
Yeah.
So no.
So yeah, we'll be in Naked Tower. One of the things I love reading Genesis. I don't know why. I guess it's just because there's so much stuff in there. And one thing that I discovered while reading, and this was before the podcast, but when you read about the Tower of Babel, it talks about this guy named Peleg, and it says his name means that the land was divided, and it's like, why? Like, what do you mean divided? Like, it was just the people divided? Was the land physically divided? Like, did God destroy the tower so much that the land split, and that's, they physically got divided?
Yeah.
So, I don't know. Just coming across things like that,
Was the
keep your eyes
ancestor
open.
of the Europeans.
Because when I listened to this all the way through the first time, I wasn't really reading along
Yeah.
with them, but now that we're discussing it, I like to go through and read to see
Yeah, I like to read along as this, podcast is going on.
to see what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So next week is Tale of a Tower. Same BEMA time, same BEMA channel.